Privilege is a curse and not a blessing. We actually should stop just calling it privilege. We should call it the privilege handicap, maybe, because privilege removes one's ability to respond to phenomena in time for healing to occur. Privilege is a denial of fracture, and fracture is nothing other than an invitation to heal. So privilege constitutes a deferral of healing in such a way that enables and promotes further damage. It's not, as Merriam-Webster would have you believe, an advantage or a benefit. It's instead more of a hindrance or a drawback. Let's take a look at certain types of privilege, starting with white privilege. White privilege insists that whiteness is preferential or achievable when in fact it isn't. Whiteness isn't an identity so much as it's an empty aspiration. The closer you get to the asymptotic ideal of whiteness, the more the illusion recedes. It's a carrot dangled before you, just like any culturally constructed ideal. It's never to be embodied. It's only to be hoped and dreamed. And this is why Ta-Nehisi Coates calls whiteness the dream with a capital D. It's an aspiration, but it's also an asymptote. You'll never actually arrive at whiteness because it's an oasis in the desert. It's a delusion. It's a mirage. Ta-Nehisi's dream is the expectation that with enough whiteness, you could finagle for yourself a higher status or more belonging, or engineer the pain out of life entirely, which is of course untrue. And whiteness is just as vulnerably human as any other color. And Ta-Nehisi describes the dreamer's unwillingness to face their own fragility as a weakness and not a strength. The privilege handicap means white people narrow the range of human experience we're willing to recognize as belonging to us, and narrowing always enfeebles, never aggrandizes, never expands. White privilege isn't just a moral failure, it's also a perceptual error. Narrowing our self-definition through exclusion diminishes everyone, not just those who are excluded, but also those doing the excluding. As Booker T. Washington had said, you can't hold a man down on the ground unless you're down there with him. Or to dig a ditch for your neighbor, you have to first get down into that hole yourself. When we lower other people, we necessarily lower ourselves. And the dream with a capital D was never going to deliver on its promises anyway. Whiteness and blackness are not competing versions of humanity. They're just different ways and expressions of the human story unfolding across time and space. Ta-Nehisi reminds us that white privilege doesn't just hurt people of color, but also hurts the people who call themselves white, those who inhabit the tall ideological towers of insulation against the blessings and buffetings of human striving. Isolation in a tall tower peering out through narrow windows at perceived enemies is a way of keeping your enemy's arrows at bay. That's true. But the same window, narrow enough to avert an arrow, is also narrow enough to admit a very little light too. Ta-Nehisi's dream, the dream of whiteness, it shelters, but it also seals. It keeps out arrows, but it keeps out light. It dims the wider world around you, and it forecloses possibilities to you. I'll now read you an excerpt from Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. He says, "A part of me thinks to be black brings you closer to the meaning of life, just as believing oneself to be white distances you from your own meaning and your own purpose. The fact is that despite their big dreams, white lives are not so inviolable. These dreamers, when their own vulnerabilities are exposed, when the police decide that tactics intended for the ghettos should enjoy wider usage, when this heavily armed society starts detaining the dreamers' children and hunting them like animals, when nature sends hurricanes and floods and calamities upon their cities, the dreamers will be shocked in ways that no black person ever could be. I wouldn't recommend that my black fellows live in some false reality or chase their own version of the dream. Better to have sweat on your back and hounds on your heels, because to varying degrees that same pain and those same hounds are on all backs and on all heels. The difference is that we don't have the privilege of living in ignorance of this essential fact. Don't aspire to the ideals of popular culture. Don't descend into your own delusional dream, but instead face every day of your brief, bright life head on. The people who must believe they are white cannot be the measuring stick of your success. Don't cope like they have coped, with comforting lies. I'd rather you be a conscious, clear-eyed citizen of this terrible and beautiful world."